Welcome to another class of Sociology, Introduction to Sociology. And we're going to pick up right where we left off. Sorry. I'm using a sick body to do this because this is for 3 weeks that I couldn't perform owing to the sickness, flu, and I just can't afford to stay away from it. I'm not bad now. I'm not bad now. Give thanks. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the participants in this course. Thank you, Lord, for the system you have made available to me so that I could do this course. Ask your blessings and protections, Lord, upon the participants, and upon the system, and upon myself. In the precious name I pray, amen. Now, we were on the point of looking at a group in Canada, the Aboriginal people, and how they are faring, not faring too well, not faring well at all. And this is clearly a case in which the situation of the incarcerated inmates interviewed on the CBC program has been structured by historical social patterns and power relationships that confront Aboriginal people in Canada generally. How do we understand it at the individual level, however? So, looking at the CBC program that has been structured by historical social patterns and power relationships, so looking at the macro picture here, that confront Aboriginal people in Canada generally. How do we understand it at the individual level, however? So we're looking now, the question here is at the micro level, at the level of personal decision making and individual responsibilities. So you view social reality from two major perspectives. One, from the macro perspective. Two, from the micro perspective. One young inmate described how, at the age of 13, he began to hang around with his cousins who were part of a gang. He had not grown up with the best life, with family members suffering from addiction issues and traumas. The appeal of what appeared as a fast and exciting lifestyle, the sense of freedom and of being able to make one's own life instead of enduring poverty, was compelling. Was compelling indeed. He began to earn money by running dope, but also began to develop addictions because apparently was using it. He was expelled from school for recruiting gang members. The only job he ever had was selling drugs. The circumstances in which he and his other inmates had entered the gang life and the difficulties getting out of it they knew awaited them when they left prison reflect a set of decision-making parameters fundamentally different than those facing most non-Aboriginal people in Canada. Now, for that person to come out of prison and change will require a lot of work from social scientists while in prison. It's going to require that. It's going to require that. A key basis of the sociological perspective is the concept that the individual and society are inseparable. It is impossible to study one without the other. German sociologist Norbert Elias called the process of simultaneously analyzing the behavior of the individuals and the society that shapes that behavior figuration. He described it through a metaphor of dancing. There can be no dance without the dancers, but there can be no dancers without the dance. Without the dancers, a dance is just an idea about motions in a choreographer, in a choreographer's head. Without a dance, there is just a group of people moving around a floor. Similarly, there is no society without the individuals that make it up. And there are also no individuals who are not affected by the society in which they live. Yes, this lady, wife of a pastor, told me that she came from a broken home, a patchwork family. I trust that you will understand what that means. Patchwork has to do with bits and pieces of, or fragments of things being put together. Patchwork family. And she said at the age of 9, when she looked at her mother's lifestyle, she said in her heart she would not live like that. Her life would not become like her mother's. She said she couldn't talk it out. She couldn't tell anybody. The mother would have crucified her. She couldn't tell anybody, but she said that in her heart. And it didn't happen. That was what she knew. That's what she had around her. The mother had a number of children, but different fathers, couldn't support them, and there wasn't one man to stand up with her. And she saw her mother enduring abuses and abuses and abuses. And at age 9, and that's what she saw, that was at her micro level. But she took a decision that that would not happen to her. When she was telling me, she had been married to this pastor, good fellow. And she had had 2 children, 2 boys. And she was a teacher when she was telling me. I threw that into the mix because professors have been saying that sociology is quite complex. And analyzing social patterns and behaviors and so on is quite complex. Quite complex. I am not going to say society does not affect people, that people can train their children and how to train them. And a child growing up at age 5 and 6 is going to become what is exposed to. He doesn't know any better. And you couldn't expect a 3-year-old to know better, having not been taught anything, having not been taught right or wrong, having not been taught not to lie, having not been taught not to use expletives, having not to, and so on, having not been taught those. But I threw that in because it was that we're looking at a complex thing, and I recall that person saying, that lady telling me that. I grew up in a socially depressed area, a very poor community. But you have a group of poor people, and yet some will be poorer than some. because I grew up with my mother most of my life. I lived with a stepfather for about 5 years. He was of a church background. He was religious too. He was religious. And although we were all poor, he was the kind of person who would work and earn. He used to work on the sugar estate. And when it was out of season, because cane crop is seasonal, cane cutting is seasonal. Some aspects of it might go on. For example, when you cut the cane, then you replant and you nurture the young, and women would work and fertilize and so on. People would cut trench for water to flow. The watermen would know how to water the cane, how to release water from the canals into the cane, when to cut it off. But the cane cutting is seasonal. Because at a point you're going to cut off all cane, all the mature cane. And then you'll be out of work for a time. He used to have a thing that he did. He used to make some things, make symbols that to play, music. He used to play music and sell during his downtime. And my mother used to sew. So although we were all poor, we were independent within the poor community. And there came a point when he was not part of the family anymore. That's a long story. He was not a part of the family. So it was just 4 children of us and our mother. But she used to sew. But then our sewing depended on the people in the community who worked on the estate. And so to an extent, the sewing was somewhat seasonal. But we were independent. Sorry, we were independent. And there were persons, there were families in the community that had both parents in the home, mother and father, and they had to look towards a certain benefits and help. They were not as independent as we were. Life is amazing, but yes, we are impacted by our communities. But we don't have to be, but we have choices too. We can think. We have the capacity to think and to make decisions. Now, since ancient times, people have been fascinated by the relationship between individuals and the societies to which they belong. The ancient Greeks might be said to have provided the foundations of sociology through the distinction they drew between physis, as nature, and nomos, law or custom. Whereas the nature of physis for the Greeks was what emerges from itself. Without human intervention, nomos in the form of laws or customs were human conventions designed to constrain human behavior. Histories by Herodotus, and he's considered the father of history, was a proto-anthropological work that described the great variations in the nomos, or laws and customs, of different ancient societies around the Mediterranean, indicating that human social life was not a product of nature, but a product of human creation. If human social life was the product of an invariable human or biological nature, all cultures will be the same. I read it again. If you, and I'm not saying this is a view, I'm not saying that this is it. This is a perspective being given. So, as a student, I wanted to get that. A perspective is being given, and as you receive this perspective, I wanted to think and see if you can come up with another perspective, not a foolish perspective, but another perspective. If I read it again, if human social life was the product of an invariable human or biological nature, if, in other words, if the life people live had to do with their nature, then the behavior of everybody should be the same. All cultures will be the same. The concerns of the later Greek philosophers, Socrates and Aristotle, were the ideal form of human community, polis or city-state, can be derived from the ethical dilemmas of this difference between human nature and human norms. The modern sociological term norm, that is a social rule that regulates human behavior, comes from the Greek term nomos. Nomos. In the 13th century, Ma Tuan Lin, a Chinese historian, first recognized social dynamics as an underlying component of historical development in his seminal encyclopedia, General Study of Literary Remains. That's the title of the encyclopedia. General Study of Literary Remains. The study charted the historical development of Chinese state administration from antiquity in a manner akin to contemporary institutional analyses. The next century saw the emergence of the historian some consider to be the world's first sociologist, the Berber scholar Ibn Khaldun of Tunisia. And he wrote, and the title of his writing was An Introduction to History. And is known for going beyond the descriptive history to an analysis of historical processes of change based on an understanding of the nature of things which are born of civilization. The nature of things which are born of civilization. So people have been inquiring into social life and phenomena. But this is an inquiry into certain phenomenon that really confronted and concerned Ibn Khaldun and others like him. Hence the book, An Introduction to History, and is known for going beyond descriptive history to an analysis of historical processes of change based on understanding of the nature of things which are born of civilization. Key to this analysis was the distinction between the sedentary life of cities and nomadic life of pastoral peoples like the Bedouin and Berbers. The nomads who exist independent of external authority develop a social bond based on blood lineage. Which enable them to mobilize quickly and to act in a unified, concerted manner in response to the rugged circumstances of desert life. The sedentaries of the city entered into a different cycle in which esprit de corps is subsumed to institutional power and political factions, and the need to be focused on subsistence is replaced by a trend toward increasing luxury, ease, and refinement of tastes. The relationship between the two poles of existence, nomadism and sedentary life, two poles, they're poles apart. Poles apart. The relationship between the two poles of existence was at the basis of the development and decay of civilizations. Why did the civilization develop and decay? Why did they decay? One could understand why they develop, because life is, people are growing, people are improving, people are experimenting, people are always seeking a finer way of living, people were making discoveries. Why should they decline or crash and be no more? However, it was not until the 19th century that the basis of the modern discipline of sociology can be said to have been truly established. Basis. The impetus for the ideas that culminated in sociology can be found in the three major transformations that defined modern society and the culture of modernity. The impetus for the ideas that culminated in sociology can be found in the three major transformations that defined modern society and the culture of modernity. The development of modern science from the 16th century onward, the emergence of democratic forms of government with the American and French revolutions, and the Industrial Revolution beginning in the 18th century. So these are the three major transformations that defined modern society and culture of modernity. I list them again. The development of modern science from the 16th century, 15 something, people started to take an interest in science. Onward, so science, modern science, the development of science is one of the three modes of, or one of the three contributors to the transformation of society. The emergence of democratic forms of government, with the American Revolution and the French Revolution. The American Revolution took place 1776, and the French Revolution took place 1789. Some authorities also included the English Revolution that culminated at the end of an 80-year war, Civil War, the English Revolution, 1648, 1688. That is not, that was no 80-year war. It's about 50, 88. But from 48 to 88, 50 years, approximately. Yes, 48, 88, approximately. And some authorities include that one as well. And the Industrial Revolution. Now, science contributed to the Industrial Revolution. People started to think scientifically. And the church it was that held back science. Sad to say. The church held it back. And at a point, people started to repudiate the church. They had to repudiate it. And they started acting outside of theology. But during that time, theology was the queen of sciences. I remember doing this course at a university. I don't remember the name of the course, but it had three major parts: science, philosophy, and religion. And the lecturer was a professor and he was doing a research work at the time. And he said he was seeking to establish that there is a connection with all three. He was seeking to establish that that knowledge was interlocking, and therefore there shouldn't be a divorce between theology and science, or science and philosophy, but they should complement one another. When you shut science out of, when theology shuts out science, it ends up in error. Science explains certain things. The same way theology explains certain things. Not only was the framework for sociological knowledge established in these events, but also the initial motivation for creating a science of society. Early sociologists like Comte and Marx sought to formulate a rational, evidence-based response to the experience of massive social dislocation and unprecedented social problems brought about by the transition from the European feudal era to capitalism. The transition from the European feudal era to capitalism. The dislocation and unprecedented social problems. Whether the intention was to restore order to the chaotic disintegration of society, as in Comte's case, or to provide the basis for a revolutionary transformation in Marx's case, a rational and scientifically comprehensive knowledge of society and its processes was required. It was in this context that society itself, in the modern sense of the word, became visible as a phenomenon to early investigators of the social condition. So people started to look into the social conditions that obtained. And then they realized that there is such a phenomenon as society. Or something like that. The development of modern science provided the model of knowledge needed for sociology to move beyond early moral, philosophical, and religious types of reflection on the human condition. Key to the development of science was the technological mindset that Max Weber termed the disenchantment of the world. Principally, there are no mysterious, incalculable forces that come into play, but rather one can, in principle, master all things by calculation. We have to break here. Time is against us. Yes. So life is complex. I don't think that you have the answer for everything.